he will send 100 people a text in 5 minutes. Or text the same person 500 texts in 1 minute. Just so that you give in to whatever he's saying for you to do, so you can just get away from the problem.
In an interview done by Fitz News, Micas Sister shares some explosive information. I have added a few clips that I found were super alarming regarding John Paul Miller and the days leading up to Mica's death.
We found out about midnight, the night that she passed away, from John Paul saying, "Good job, Francis family." And this
that was via text, right?
That was text.
Yeah.
He said, "This is what happens when you encourage someone to get divorced and not take their medication." And we all knew that was just a lie. Like everything he said, like all 3 points, was just completely a lie. And we have so much proof against it. So we just were like, we just ignore him at this point because we're just used to his deception. So we didn't even buy into it. And within a few hours, he had texted about 100 people that she had passed away that night. And it just kind of went crazy from there, where people are reaching out to us, posting all over social media. Like the next day, he told his whole entire congregation what had happened before even, I mean, our cousins and aunts and uncles, like Micah's family that doesn't even live in Myrtle Beach because we're not from here, didn't even know the news yet. And he was already telling all these people who don't even know who she is or thought they knew her. But if you didn't speak positively about John Paul in any way, you are not allowed to be near Mica whatsoever. And that goes for anyone, even her sister. Our whole family, we would speak on what we thought was not okay, what was controlling, it was brainwashing came up every single week in our family. That word came up every single week on like, what do we do? And it came to the point where we didn't even say anything for probably a year. We literally just let her do whatever she was going to do because we couldn't control it anyway. So we just had to be like, well, I really love my sister and I want to see her. So I have to pretend like I'm okay with going to dinner with John Paul. And I would go to dinner with my sister. He had to be there. But even when, like the first time he put Mica in the hospital, our family was like, this is like not like her. She's not mentally unstable. She's perfectly fine. She's healthy. She was 23, 24, 25, one of those three, when she's supposedly having a bipolar episode for the first time, which none of us had seen signs for before. Which, I mean, everything behind that was just John Paul had been taking probably since he was in his older teens, early 20s, he started taking medication for his mental health. He's been on schizophrenia medication for over 20 years.
Okay.
And there's videos that are coming out because people had seen his behavior a long time ago, 20 years ago. And that's when they started seeing signs, and they never posted, shared anything because they were scared of what he was going to do.
What's her mood like? You know, how was she doing in general with everything that she was going through?
The first few days were the worst. She actually stayed with me, and her last straw was him putting her into the mental hospital against her will. The police, he lied to the counselors at the mental facility. He ran in there and said, "My wife's trying to kill herself. You need to come get her," which wasn't the truth. She actually ran away from him. She was trying to get away from him. And he has shown patterns of throughout their relationship, whenever she just needed a break because of all this abuse she's going to, she would literally just ask for an hour to hang out with just her siblings without him. And he would take that as them getting too much space away from each other. So, I mean, he would always have a tracker on her phone. He would always, in like this later times, like the current times, he always had a tracker on her car, But back then, before all this was happening, he would always use a location on her phone. So he's been tracking her for years. And me and Micah would just be at lunch and he would just randomly show up. Or I would meet Micah for lunch and then she would just look down and be like, he just shut off my phone. He just shut off my cards. He completely can freeze her whole entire life. If she doesn't do what he says, he literally has control to her whole life from his cell phone.
And he used that control?
Yeah, that was just like
Yeah.
every few months. I witnessed personally one of those things happening where he would just randomly show up out of nowhere and we're like, where did he come from? And Mike is like, he has a location on my phone. Or we'll just be sitting at lunch and she'll be like, oh my gosh, we had the worst fight today. And why can't we just go through a normal, like a healthy relationship does have fights, but you get through them. And he always calls someone to mediate their fight and tell them basically that everything bad that Micah had done, and just flipped the script and the story. And Micah was wrong every time. He's basically ruthless until he gets what he wants. Everyone that knows him, he will send 100 people a text in 5 minutes. Or text the same person 500 texts in 1 minute. Just so that you give in to whatever he's saying for you to do, so you can just get away from the problem.
Go to lunch. What do you think about what happened that day?
I think our family is so disappointed with the Robeson County Sheriff's Office for not properly doing an investigation. It had all of the signs that someone would have if they did commit suicide, almost too perfectly. And they wanted it. It seems to us, it's our belief that it only took them like a week to get together all the information of John Paul's alibi and where Micah was that day. They didn't interview anybody properly from that site. More and more people are coming out saying that they were there at the scene and they weren't questioned. Nobody, even the kayaker or fisherman that found her belongings, he was talked to for about a few minutes and said, okay, thanks, goodbye. It just came out in a video that when one of the employees from that state park, they saw him leaving in a truck and with his boat behind him whenever he left with Micah's stuff. And when he came to bring it back, he had went to the store and then came back in a different car, like a white car.
And nobody from the police have questioned that.
No one from the police have questioned that. No one even swabbed his hands for any residue, anything. His story from what I've seen on the internet, his story and other people interviewing him, other people are going to interview him other than the police because everyone's saying, what happened that day, right? The same question, what happened that day? The proper interviews just weren't done. The fisherman's story of how he found Micah and what he did that day, from their interviews and everything online, everybody can see it. It's changed 2 or 3 times. That the lady that she lived with at the time, it was a nice older lady. It was a more like a grandma figure to her. She kind of felt like she needed that. And John Paul, and she had been to the church Solid Rock for a while. She loved her friends and community there. She doesn't have family here. She's from New York. And when she took Micah in, John Paul kicked her out of the church and told her not to come back. John Paul didn't give us a choice.
Right.
He immediately, the day after she passed, or the following morning, the next business day, I'll say, after she passed, he already went to his attorneys to get the divorce dropped. Which raises so much. He and because we found that out, we already and it's so sad to even know this. Micah had already appointed our sister Sierra over her email, her passwords to it, her Facebook account. Mica had been keeping track of all of her abuse, wrote every affidavit that someone has given her or their testimony against what they've seen. For the lawyer, she had a huge binder already prepared. She had all kinds of journals. She was anticipating something bad happening to her. And she had told Sierra that. And that's why she said, if anything happens to me, she had told one of our family members that she reported John Paul to the IRS the week that she passed away. The church, or not John Paul, but the church. Well, the church is John Paul. So
Right.
either one. Whenever you say Solid Rock, it's John Paul. All of the money is all intermingled. And it was said that he was moving around all his assets into his oldest son's name or his friends' names. So it didn't look like he had as much as he had while they were going through this divorce. Did see her body, and there was bruising all over her hands and her arms. And whenever we talked to the medical examiner, he said, "What bruises?" He said, when I saw her, there were no bruises. And so I said, is there any possible way, whenever she was taken out of the water, are there any room for any kind of error in that? Are there bruises from people who grabbed her from the water, the examiners? He said, it's not possible for the body to bruise after the heart has stopped. So those bruises were on her before she was in the water.
This interview holds such important information regarding the case of Mica Miller. I am too so invested and won't stop exposing John Paul Miller until there is a conclusion for Mica and for every one of his victims out there. If you have any information or tips, please send it to the email address below, justiceformicatips@gmail.com.